bring you a special bulletin.
This is a test of the emergency broadcast system.
In 5, check for sound. 4,
It's showtime.
3,
Let's
2,
go.
1, launch.
You're listening to the Pro Audio Suite, a program for audio and voiceover professionals. Our hosts are George the Tech Whittam, Robert Marshall, Darren Robbo Robertson, and myself, Andrew Peters. And don't forget, check out our Facebook page, the Pro Audio Suite Podcast. Leave your feedback there. Now let's get on with the show. Welcome to another Pro Audio Suite, and we're all on board this week, which is good. We have Robert in Chicago. G'day, Robert.
Hello.
George I think he's in Colorado from memory. Is that correct, George?
Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder. Nanu. And up in Sydney, the barely functioning Robbo.
Hello. I'm here.
Been a big week for you, Robbo.
I made it.
You got through it, which is a good thing. Now, this week we're doing a show on radio imaging, which is probably a subject you don't really want to talk about, Robbo, because I think that's been most of your week.
Well, yeah, but, 5 16-hour days of it, but no, let's do it.
Yeah, we love it when a station decides to relaunch and repackage everything. And I'm sure one guy, in fact, our guest today would love that. And that, of course, is Andreas from Benztown. We'll be talking to him a bit later on. He's also just scored a nice tasty bit of business, which we'll mention a bit later in the show if you haven't heard already. But talking about radio imaging and radio in general.
I think it's a good topic, something we haven't touched on yet.
Well, we haven't. And my first question is, and I know that this is probably one for George, if you're set up to record radio imaging, what are the basics that you need for your studio?
I would say I don't think it differs that much from other types of voice work for the voice actor, but, because as a talent, your job generally is still to just record a good, clean, direct, dry voice. A lot of producers don't like the talent slathering on a bunch of front-end stuff. But, a very direct, dry-sounding studio, I think, is definitely important. Because the producer's not going to want to have to listen to whatever reverberation or resonances that are in your studio. So for some people, that might even mean a dynamic mic to get that kind of a sound. But certainly a shotgun mic, our favorite 41.6, or maybe that Rode NTG4 that I hear you've been playing around with, Andrew, could be a pretty good tool for that kind of work.
Is it the kind of work that's more done and mailed in and not as many live sessions, or is there also a connectivity?
These days, there's a lot of out of house voices used. Absolutely, especially now that radio stations have realised they can reach out to the world to find their station voice. Up until recently, one of the stations that I image in Singapore was using an Australian male and female. So and that's certainly not unusual.
Yeah, it's funny because the stuff I do, I don't even talk to the client at all, the producer at all. I mean, I just get an email if there's any pronunciations that need to be looked at that could be tricky, local names and whatever. They'll give me a little sound bite. He'll just say it and I'll obviously mimic the pronunciation. But apart from that, I just do it all on my own, maybe 3 takes and it's gone. Talking about microphones, though, I did actually see, I think it was on Recording Hacks, and it was a piece about the 41.6. And at the bottom, there was a rant from a guy who's obviously a talent. I read that and I actually thought it wasn't a rant. I thought he was quite justified in what he was saying. And he was bemused and confused by the proliferation of the 41.6 as a voiceover mic.
Because it's so full of distortion?
I think it's, a lot of things. It's, certainly got its own sound, but I don't think it's particularly an accurate sound as far as capturing the human voice. It's certainly hyped. That was.
What's fascinating about that mic is it sounds compressed.
I think it's more. It's got a big proximity effect to it. It's a shotgun, so it kind of, the only thing with a bigger proximity effect than that would be a figure 8, but then it would pick up too much of the other side of the mic. But I think it's that with a certain sort of, I don't know what harmonic distortion it is, but it's this type of distortion that makes it cut through mixes. And so it makes it very easy to mix with. And it certainly has like a kind of a bigoning effect to most people's voice, I think.
Definitely. Yeah, it definitely has a bigoning effect. That's for sure. It just has this innate weird quality of sounding already processed. I was working with a talent yesterday with an Apollo and we were setting up processing chains and all this kind of stuff. And he was saying, I'd set up one with processing with a limiter and a compressor, and he was working with CBS, and they were saying, hey, man, will you cut out the compression? And so I made him a chain without compression, without limiting, just some EQ. And I listened to him through the chain on Source Connect now, because when I'm dialing in people's processing, I'm doing it real time live over Source Connect now. And you're listening to his read back with no compression whatsoever on the 416, about a fist's width away from the mic, so pretty tight. And it still sounds like there's some kind of compression on it. It's really fascinating what that mic does. It's totally different.
Yeah, I think if anybody wanted to hear, what it more sounds like, then they would get an Omni microphone, get it extremely close to them, and that would have no proximity effect and would be probably a little bit more accurate and maybe even unflattering, but it would probably sound incredibly natural.
You mean a DPA D-Fine headset earset mic for about $800 with the capsule about 1.5 inches from your mouth to the left?
That would definitely work.
That'd do it.
Yeah. But it would be that very clean, natural. It wouldn't be that huge like sound. And I think it's the imperfections that are the things that make the 416 special.
41.6.
The thing that struck me, because AP and I were talking about this during the week, is that from what I can see of the curve, it's very much where you EQ anyway. Where you go in and you get that sort of, I call it the air, up in that 5K and up mark. Mm-hmm. The 416 almost does that for you. You know what I mean?
It's the voiceover version of the 80s AKG D112 for a kick drum.
Yeah, right.
It's like just like, of course, there's your kick drum EQ. Snappy 80s kick.
It's a pre-EQ'd mic.
I guess for me,
it's the lazy producer's mic. Oh, did I say that?
I started out in radio 30 odd years ago, and 416 was the only microphones in the building in production suites. But the interesting thing, I guess, is that, that's all the shit that you hype when you do radio. You over compress, you stick in more of that high stuff than you would normally do, because you want it to cut through a thumping promo bed underneath and all that sort of stuff. So I guess for radio, in terms of today's episode, that's the sort of stuff you're looking for anyway, I suppose.
I think for anything announcer, it's not just radio, it's also commercial announcer, anything that you want to cut through and be like, have this sort of listen to me edginess, possibly even on the verge of like annoying, like right in your face,
Yeah.
Like you can't get away from me kind of sound.
That's right.
It's got the sound of being inside your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's crazy, Robert and guys, is that I have talked to numerous voiceover actors whose primary role is as an audiobook narrator, or only thing they do is audiobook. Would you believe? I know a number of them, not like newbies, but fellows with 800 plus titles under their belt that use the 41.6.
See, I would think for an audiobook.
Is that bizarre for an audiobook?
It is. I would think for an audiobook more in that price range, and it's like more like a 103 or something a little bit more natural and open and just, like that's not so fatiguing.
So does that mean it's a really versatile mic, or does that mean it's just everybody's just kind of given up?
I said to AP the other day, I think it's a bit like, it's almost becoming a bit of a standard. Do you know what I mean? Like, because you walk into any audio production facility around here, or even in Melbourne, I've been to a few in Melbourne, everyone uses a 416, and AP, I'm sure, would attest to this. If you go in for a session somewhere, 95% of the time, you'll be standing in front of a 416. So I would say
it replaced the U87.
Yeah. I actually think it's just the sound that people expect now. If you send someone a file and that you haven't recorded with them, they're probably, their ears are used to that 416 sound. So if it doesn't sound like that, they're going, hang on, what's wrong here?
I'd agree.
Well, I've had that experience directly
of the month. Yep. Or the 10 years.
Or the decade, or the last 3 decades. I have a situation where a client was using a 41.6, recording promo, doing stuff for ABC, and I was in there notching out 8K. I wasn't happy with how mid-high, I thought it was harsh. So I smoothed out the mic. Well, the engineers at ABC is like, is there something up with the mic? Is there something wrong with that mic? And I'm thinking, no. But, I EQ'd out what makes that mic sound like that mic. And as soon as I did that, they were like, well, whatever you did, can you just turn that off? And I just flattened the EQ and they're like, there we go, thanks.
Yeah,
and I'm
right.
listening to it and going, oh, it's so harsh. And, but that is a sound. That's what they're
the
used
sound.
to. And that's what they were looking for.
Yeah.
It's that buzz saw that will cut through anything.
Yeah. It's like we sort of alluded to at the beginning of the show. I've done pretty much a solid week of radio this week where normally my week's a bit more mixed. And I got to last night, I seriously got to 5:30, 6 o'clock last night as I was finishing the last promo. And my ears were so fatigued it wasn't funny. I just
was blood dripping out your ears?
Yeah, I was just so aware that my ears just couldn't take any more of it. If today had been a work day, I would have had to take the day off because it just does your head in. It's crazy.
So the point where it's gone too far is when the 416 becomes the preferred vocal mic for like music. And I'm not
happens?
kidding here.
Surely
I
not.
wouldn't be surprised if it becomes the preferred vocal mic for rap.
Really? Yeah,
Why
well,
not?
I suppose it's got that spoken word quality to it though, doesn't it? I guess.
Yeah, I could see it happening. Just like slice through that big mix.
Yeah.
And it's got that sort of like in your face quality. I think it might work for certain productions, but if it becomes the mic for whatever, like some jazz singer, like, oh my God, okay.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Well, we've been playing around with shoddies this week, hence the discussion that Robbo and I have been having. But and one of the mics we'll talk about in a couple of episodes when we do one on road cases is the NTG4, which is a field mic. It's a shoddy, but it does have a couple of features which
Shotgun to the rest of the world.
Shotgun mic, indeed. And it does have a couple of filters, like a high pass and a high boost, which is kind of handy if you're on the road in a Doona castle or a pillow fort.
So the high boost gives it a little bit more of a 41.6 top end hype. Is that right?
Yeah.
When you kick in the high boost?
Yep.
So besides the Rode and the 416, which really I think the Rode is trying to slide in there and do a similar thing as the 416, but does anybody find shotguns being used for voiceovers and not for ADR? Because all kinds of other shotguns are used for ADR, but specifically for voiceovers and promos. Does anybody find like Shep's shotguns being used for these or some other popular shotgun?
No.
Commonly?
I can't think of ever seeing
Everybody's
one.
buying one to save money. It's very rare I find someone that buys a better 41.6, like the MKH60 or the Shep's or the Neumann or whatever, because they also don't sound like the 41.6.
They don't.
So,
and it's a funny thing. I wonder if part of the popularity of the 41.6 also boiled down to, well, it's half the price of a U87.
Maybe.
Well,
Third the price these days.
Oh, it'd be a third. I think
A third of the price, yeah.
You pay, in Australian dollars, you're paying 4,000, close to 3,500 for a U87, and you're paying 1,000 for a 41.6.
Oh, they're under 1,000 US now? I thought they were like $1,200.
No, you pick one up for 1,000 Aussie, so I think 900.
You're talking new, right?
Yeah.
You're talking new? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So definitely I think the price could have helped its popularity, so to speak,
But doesn't it go back to that promo guy in the States years and years ago who
it does
wanted to get out of the booth because he thought everyone was talking about him behind his back?
Yeah, the name right now slips my mind, but the Love Boat announcer, the fellow that announced all the Love Boats in the 70s on ABC, I can't believe I can't remember his name right now, but he was the one that said, I want to be outside the booth. I want to be in the control room. I don't like being in here all day because that was the day of live promo announcing. You were in the booth all day, just doing live promo. So he hated being in there all day and kind of behind the glass like a zoo animal.
What was Don LaFontaine like?
Don, I'm sure Don was on a 416 all the time, but at home he was on a Manly cardioid reference
the big
mic
gold
for
one?
the last time that I knew him, black and red one. It's the 41.6 became popular. The legend is for that reason, because it was able to reject control room noise better than a large diaphragm mic would.
Yeah.
And it just started to gain momentum. I think once it was being used on Don a lot, then it just really stuck. And it's been there ever since. And there's a lot of voice talent who are looking for an alternative to that mic. I know fellows trying out other Sennheisers, like the 8000 series is their newer series,
Nice.
and they're
The large diaphragm
in
one?
many ways superior
Yeah.
mics. And they have the 8040, the 8050, 8060, and the the 8050s are really nice sounding hypercardioid pencil mic. It's only 5 inches long or 4 inches long, and travels really well. And if you know how to use it, it sounds dang good.
AP, what was the Shaw mic that was the standard in the on-air studios here in Australia through the 80s and the 90s? It's gone out of my head.
Well, there was the SM7.
That's the one.
The
I was gonna bring
SM7B,
that up.
yeah. That was... we both got the cough this morning. The SM7B, that was all through...
It was all through everywhere, wherever you went.
That
was
is
the one.
still a very popular mic, and it's very popular also in music circles. It's sort of not as glorious as some big, large diaphragm condenser, but you'd be surprised how many even final vocals for albums are done with that mic. And if it's given the right preamp, that mic is great, but it needs a good preamp behind it.
It needs a lot of because it needs a lot of gain. I saw even if you watch the Metallica movie documentary, you'll see the SM7B being used for vocals in that.
Yeah, right.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
It's used quite a bit, and there's a number of microphones in that sort of dynamic condenser-ish void. Like the 421 comes to mind, which is one of my favorite mics. Certainly, the 441 as well. Even the Beyer M88 is in that area, I believe.
Yeah, and there's that new one I mentioned to you, Andrew, the Microtech Gefell Dynamic. That I saw at NAMM. That thing sounded very hi-fi, for lack of a better word. It had a pretty open top end, considering it was a $500 dynamic mic. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah,
Wow.
I saw your video on that because you sent me the link to it, but I saw it when you first posted that link, and I saw that they were launching one, and I was curious to watch that video to see what you had to say, but it looks like it's pretty good. Yeah,
I think Neumann's got a handheld dynamic that is supposed to again be very just good, even though it's dynamic. The materials. It's probably all in the material science that makes those things.
yeah. Now, while we're talking about that part of the world, we're going to stay in Germany because our guest is in Stuttgart. Hence the reason for the name of the company, Benztown. It's Andreas Sannemann. Well, we have our special guest this week is Andy Sannemann from Benztown Branding, which I'm guessing is going to be based in Stuttgart, based on the fact that so is Mercedes-Benz. Is that correct, Andy?
That is correct. It's based in Stuttgart in Germany and in Glendale, which is a part of Los Angeles in California. As well, there's people working basically in all time zones. So we got staff in the UK, New Zealand, Australia, and there's people on the East Coast in the United States as well.
Give us a rundown, mate. What do you do? How do you do it? Where do you do it?
A rundown of a typical day. I mean, this is a tough one because there is hardly a typical day if you try to run our operation that size within different time zones. But in a perfect world, I'd like to spend a lot of time with my team here and also get in front of Pro Tools, and because I still do a lot of the CHR production for Benztown. Of course, there's a lot of administrative work involved, a lot of management work, which I hate the term management, so I call it more like trying to help other people out going through their day, to phrase it in a nicer way. But it's really tough to say an ideal day looks like that or looks like that.
Where did you get the idea to set up Benztown?
So my partner here, Ollie, and I were doing custom imaging in Germany and Switzerland and Austria. And before we were working for several stations as fixed staff, got out 2.5 and then basically started our imaging / production company doing mainly jingles and being trapped kind of in the situation, either doing work or trying to get new business on. We decided to look for a bigger market, or the biggest market, which was basically the United States, and I think still is the biggest radio market. So flew over there, met some people. Basically, people were asking if we could do an imaging service, and without me ever seeing an imaging service before, I was brave enough to say yes, and that's basically how the ride started in 2007, 2008. After meeting my partner Dave, who is still in charge of the entire U.S. operation.
As well
Wow.
as being creative on the air, you as a business, as a brand, Benztown is pretty creative in terms of things off the air as well. Things like the Iron Imager and all that sort of stuff. How did all that find its way into your business mix?
Oh, that's a great question, indeed. I mean, I think we never thought about like doing something for marketing purpose. It's just something which is built in naturally in like my Dave's and all these personalities. So being inspired by guys like Richard Branson or like the guys who really like put themselves out there to help the brand they work for like to succeed. I think these things just came naturally like to us because we also wanted like to give something back to the imaging community, right? And like I think in Europe and the United States, it's mostly like the guy sits somewhere in a dark chamber, like down in the basement and creating stuff. And like our goal was a little bit with our imager to shine light like on these people who are significantly important to shape and create like a brand, a sound brand, you know, the brand for the station. And I think that was the story behind Iron Imager. But in general, with all we do, we just try to be genuine and give something back to the community and put ourselves out there and shine a light on our craft, which is, I think, often overlooked and not for the right reasons, to be really honest.
I notice you also have, and I may be completely wrong here, but do you have some kind of a barter system?
Yeah, basically most of the business we do in the United States is based on barter. That's a typical business structure in the United States. So it's very uncommon in Europe. US and Canadian market is like the most common system. Like I think like 80% of all the radio transactions in the United States are done programming wise on a barter basis.
So you in return for your product, you receive airtime. Is that correct?
Exactly. And some other guy / company is going to go and sell that for you and then take a cut and you get the money. That's like also a short explanation for something which is really complex and complicated for a creative guy like me to understand. So I'm not the specialist for barter dealings and barter in general.
Yeah, because we actually do have a system here with our traffic network, which is the Australian Traffic Network, which is an American company. Yeah, so we have that same system. So say based on the barter system, say for instance, me being a voice guy, I want to get onto Benztown's website and offer my services to whoever wants to buy it. Do I work on a barter system or do I work on a cash system?
Yeah, that's basically what we do for you. Like we basically put you in a barter system, but pay you cash. So, which is for us a little bit risky because we obviously go in advance, and you never know for like the exact amount of the number the airtime gets sold because this is of course fluctuating after. And like I said, I'm really not the specialist, but this is really considering like economic terms and like bookings from big agencies and advertisers. So in general, like. We pay the people in our roster cash, but we trade them in for barter. Wow,
that's a really, really interesting model. I know it works very well for the Australian Traffic Network here.
Yeah, I think it works pretty well for our voiceover talents too. I mean, if you go to the site, benztown.com, go to voiceover, you see, I'm really blessed, and I think we're all really thankful for the great voiceover people we work with, and we use them as well in our libraries. And we're really blessed, like to work with a lot of them for a long time. And this goes also like kind of back to Australia, which is a funny story. So the guy I worked the most with on the CHR library is called Harry Legg. And I found Harry when I was in Australia in 2005, visiting a guy called Casey Baker at 2Day FM.
Oh, yeah.
And I love, you might remember the name, DJ
He's
Casey.
a mate of mine. Absolutely.
Oh, is he a mate of yours, Robbo? Casey.
He is indeed.
Okay.
Casey Baker, yeah.
So basically, Casey was using this like powerful, awesome American voiceover, and I came back to Germany and remembered that, and I was like, who was that guy? So I reached out to Casey and said, hey, Casey, like the voiceover guy you're using, what's his name? And he said, yeah, it's Harry. Here's an introduction. He's a good friend of mine, blah, blah, blah. So that's how I basically started to know Harry, and Harry is the voice of our CHR library since we started in 2007. So like we've been with a lot of these people for a long, long time, and really appreciate their ongoing support and the climate we could create for them and us on the business side too.
I put this out there. I reckon Casey Baker's probably one of the most talented CHR producers that's been around for a long time. It's a shame he decided to go off and make his own movies and produce his own movies. But I tell you what, his work at that time was killer.
Yeah, I agree. Like, he's a really impressive guy, as well as a lot of Australian talent. I was really happy to work with back in the days and still are. So there's a lot of great Australian imaging producers. Just to name a few: Matt Nikolic, David Konsky, of course, Robbo himself. I mean, Saidi. There's so many good people. I mean, it's impressive for a relatively small country or population how many great imaging guys you have. And not to forget Chris Davis, who we work with on the Hot AC library. Really talented guy.
Yeah, it's funny. It all started with Jeff Thomas, I think. I think he was the first real one to make his international stamp. And I think, I trained under Tomo. I started my career under Tomo and I learned a lot from him. But I tell you, he was probably the first real Australian name to get out there, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I think it was a different thing. I think it was part of the that whole consultancy of radio stations that came out of Australia. Ian Grace was one who was picked up by Richard Branson to program the Virgin Network.
Well, that's how Tomo landed there, right?
Correct, yeah. So that was kind of really the beginning of all that, and that was early 90s.
Yeah, I think Australian radio in general is pretty impressive.
So where's the growth for Benztown at the moment then? I mean, clearly Australia has been, in the last couple of years, sort of killing things in a production sense, but where's the growth for Benztown now?
Dude, we're growing. I mean, we're luckily growing on all ends. So, I mean, we do a lot of different things, mostly around the term radio imaging. But, I mean, we got really growth overall business area. So we still grow on the library side of things, which is one of the most successful ventures. And the first we started in the United States. More than 1,700 clients now and still growing. Affiliations all over the globe. Voiceover, we still grow there. Custom imaging has been the latest department where we saw significant growth over the last year. Fantastic. And we're exploring new things too. I mean, not to say that Ollie and I still compose a lot of music for jingles and do a lot of TVC work over here in Europe. And there's a lot of things going on at the same time, but it's all growing and all healthy, which is I'm pretty happy about, to be really honest.
Yeah. So talk us through the libraries, because they're of particular interest to me. I've always sort of thought about starting a library, and then I look at the work that you guys do and some of the other great stuff that's out there and just think, you know what, I don't need to compete with that. But you have a particular way of working. Each of your libraries has its own production dude, right? And its own voiceover and all the rest of it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we do basically 22 different libraries. I think mostly all radio formats covered. And of course, there's one or two voiceovers, dedicated voiceovers to that library too. And then you got creative people behind it, like writers. Sometimes the imaging guy writes himself. Sometimes there's a writer involved. And then a lot of people who make all the zip-zap sounds, noises, music, and all that goes into that library, which is kind of like if we describe people, what we do. So we provide the ingredients for guys like you to create product.
It's actually quite interesting. It's like it's sort of a producer in your pocket, isn't it? If for those who sort of aren't radio orientated, the libraries are formatted for CHR or AC or classic rock or whatever your station's format is. But basically, as well as the sounds and sound effects that you'd expect, there's also sort of pre-produced promo beds and pre-produced music montages and promos and sweepers and all that sort of stuff, which must take you guys a massive amount of time across all those libraries to produce all that stuff.
It does. Yeah, it does. It's a big time commitment, also a big money commitment, because at the end of the day, you need to pay all these people to put this together, right? Mm. But I think it has a lot of advantages for a lot of different reasons, especially in the United States, where there's one imaging guy left for 6 radio stations.
Yeah.
So as you are a specialist for this yourself, you can relate to what their work days are looking and how realistic is that they're gonna get everything done. Their PD, APDs of all the different stations asking them to do. Mm. So we solve, I think, a real problem here, which means time and lack of people, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I equate it to when I was working, I always would mix out a promo, but then I'd mute the voiceover, and on a Friday afternoon when the PD came in and said, I need this promo done and I want it on the air by 9 o'clock in the morning, you do the old sneaky, back in those days, pull out the DAT that had all your promo beds on it. You flick through and go, I can use that one and I can chop to that one, and sort of cheat your way out of having to build a whole promo. And you guys sort of dish that up, but sort of, on steroids, really.
I mean, it's really also different depending on the market, depending on the people using it. But we can really see the differences in usage, which is not related to any like factors. So you can't basically tell guys in big markets just going to go do this, guys in smaller markets just going to use this, or this particular format is like these categories are the most important. It is really not the case because everyone using that library is working kind of different. There's not a clear user case, I think is what I want to say.
Yeah.
What is your plan for that event when radio does become a less of an important part of our daily life?
It's really difficult to say because we're like still in it. So, I mean, I feel I agree. I mean, technology is going to change and technology has changed. I mean, we see DAB Plus in Europe. I don't know if you guys have that over there.
Yep.
Of course, we got the internet, right? Oh, surprise. We got like now smart speakers, which basically transmit radio just in a different form. What we do right now, like kind of podcast, is kind of like talk radio. So I think there's going to be growth fields for the fields who are going to basically go back, right? So I'm not believing, especially in a big country, the United States, that terrestrial radio is going to die. So I don't see that like all that negative than other people, but there's definitely a shift coming. And with AI and a lot of new things, Google go into podcasting now and a lot of new things going on. I mean, there's going to be definitely new fields to conquer and new things to do. But I think our audio expertise will make us relevant for all these type of things. And you see that in the podcast world too, right? You have like fantastic produced and well put together podcasts. And you also have like podcasts really not sound that great. And I think like guys like Robbo and we could be a great help for these people, you know? And I think like diversification is like a word like everybody's using just all the time. And I think that's literally speaking, I mean, that's the key. I mean, I think you need to diversify more and then try to make inroads in new types of like how to create the business. If this is movie, if this is podcast, if this is like online content, I mean, they all need kind of like sounds and what we do, maybe in a different form, but I still believe there's going to be a market for what we do, 100%.
Yeah. Now, talking about sound, I've got to chuck this one in there. ASMR. What are your thoughts on ASMR?
That's a difficult one.
Put him on the spot.
Yeah. It's the weirdest thing, and I find it quite strange that it's not just voice, but it's sound. It could be someone brushing their hair or something for 30 minutes. It's all quite bizarre.
I don't know. I think, of course, there has to be like a psychological component to that, right? I mean, not that we can doubt that there is no component to this, but I mean, it's really like to put me on the spot. I really never like thought about it big time. So this is something which I really would have to dig in and like try to do some research on. I mean, I've seen the videos of girls basically brushing things to make you sleep or doing whispers like for half an hour, but I definitely believe there's a psychological meridian or psychological component to it, and also like a sensory component to it. But as being not an MDR or like a doctor, it's really difficult for me to elaborate on those things. You know, I mean, there's specialists for that, I assume, and they can tell you far more things than I could. So.
But what I find interesting, though, and no one's actually done this yet that I'm aware of, but you can almost see ASMR being used in certain formats. If you're doing a format that is, say, for instance, a smooth kind of format, you could almost have subliminal sounds in the background that are just barely audible, that have the effect that you get from ASMR. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it tested. It'd be interesting.
At least in our industry, right? I don't know like what like the big car companies do. Maybe you get an orgasm when you slam a door in a particular way, or like you get into the... I don't know. I mean, but I wanted to say, I mean, there's industries who have a lot of more budgets to spend on stuff like that.
But I can imagine that in a car, actually. If you had ASMR in cars, that if you do something like you're speeding or you're falling asleep or you're moving out of lanes, I mean, this is all part of autonomous cars, but some kind of sound will happen to counteract whatever you're going through that could be dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely like a lot of new interesting ways this could get us to. But like I said, I'm really not an expert. I mean, I cross-read a few articles back in the days. I mean, there was a big one on the BBC about it. A German newspaper, like I think I found it, like took it up a few months ago, but it's really not my field. Besides, I think there's something there, but the question is like how much and like who can use it. Kind of like hard to answer for me right now.
Yeah, like I've said, I don't think anyone's actually thought about how that could work in a radio situation, but as part of a format package.
Yeah, but I think people already do it, right? If you look for a soft jazz format, for example, I mean, people already do it maybe by accident. I mean, you're not putting like a rock jingle on a soft AC format or a soft smooth jazz format, right? So you already work with kind of like what is like used in that world, right? You already work with like pads and like sounds were soft and gentle, like to support the voiceover and that imaging. The sound logos of certain companies already like far smoother than they used to be, you know. I mean, if you look at the car brands like Audi, I mean, is this ASMR or is this like just a sound logo, which, like a heartbeat, what is it? I mean, I think people do that by accident already because they feel something when they create sound, right? They can't maybe describe it in a scientific way, but they already feel something when they create something. And I think that's part of it.
Yeah, well, you think about Nike. I mean, they did the same thing with the Swish years ago, so and probably didn't even think about what they had done.
Yes.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. But now talking about voices, your voice bank is predominantly US voices. Is that because your major market is based in the United States?
Yeah, I think that's the case. And then because we're not a management company, right? So we're not a voiceover management company. It's really important. We're not a management voiceover company. If I would try to build a voiceover management company, of course, there's going to be a lot of more other talents on there. And we used to have like some Australian talent on there. It's just difficult to market and to get signings, for them in the United States. Of course, because I think the accent and the US stations rely on the guys they know and they had forever. Yeah, but we had a guy called Rick Wade, which is also one of my oldest friends in Australian radio. He was on our roster for a long time, and maybe he still is.
I don't know Rick, actually. Do you know Rick, Robbo?
I know the name, yeah.
He used to be one of the imaging guys, Triple M, back in the days. He was
that's it. That's where I know him from, yeah.
He was our voiceover for the Rock Library, and like he was used by one of our employees now these days, Justin, who used to work in Albuquerque, and he used him as a station voice in Albuquerque, which was pretty uncommon, like to have an Aussie voice guy on an American radio station, but it sounded pretty cool. And I think it worked well for them because it was a significant difference. So I think we also have some UK voiceover to be fair, but it's just not that we can't deliver in terms of like people not going to call us and say, hey, can we have XYZ from the UK for barter in the United States? I don't think this is going to happen,
Yeah. It's interesting actually with Australian voices though, because now I'm doing more overseas work. And we were, in fact, Robbo and I were talking about this just today. The radio stations in Singapore, quite a number of them have Australian voiceover doing their imaging.
There's a lot of Australian programmers there,
Yeah.
It's like the Philippines having like a relationship with the United States. So we do a lot of work on the Philippines. A lot of the voiceovers is US, and a lot of the imaging is US type style of imaging. And I think for Singapore is because there's a lot of Australian PDs, a lot of Australian radio folks there. So they rely on what they know and what matches the market for them, I mean, you see that with the UAE and like England, for example, or the UK. There's so many British people in the UAE working in Dubai and then doing radio there.
Well, it's funny because I do Dubai Eye in Dubai, and it's myself and an English voiceover, Emma Clark, in fact, her name is. Give her a plug. So that's cool. It's an interesting thing because I'm sort of like that what they used to call Mid-Atlantic, I think, in the good old days. And probably used to smoke Peter Stuyvesant while they were being Mid-Atlantic voiceovers.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, our business is a pretty relationship-based business. And I also think it's difficult for somebody who's not native speaking to feel what type of accident is it in a particular way, I would assume that a guy from Singapore, let's say a Malay guy from Singapore, has a hard time to define if you have like a little bit of Australian, English, or American accent. If you can do it right, which I assume you could with your track record. So
I think you're right. I think that it's the same with, I mean, ask the average non-North American if they were in a bar with a Canadian and an American, they probably wouldn't be able to pick the two apart.
100%. 100%.
So what's your favorite format to work in then?
That's a really tough question because, I mean, I'm a radio guy through and through, so I kind of like, if I say I like everything, it's kind of like
I get that.
CHR is my go-to, and I really enjoy doing CHR. But I also love like rhythmic, I love urban, I love rock. I think rock is a really interesting and really awesome format to work in because you can go over, you can cross borders, you can do crazy stuff. And I think all the writing-related formats is cool to work in too. So I've never done a lot of news talk imaging, but I'm really impressed with the work my guys do on the news talk side of things because there's so much writing and so much creative going into that format, which is not as production intense, but a lot of more head intense than like a CHR station, in my opinion. So I think like all the formats have their interesting points, to be really honest.
I was only thinking about this morning, and I'm interested in your answer, and I won't give you my answer to this question that I contemplated this morning until I hear yours. But for me, the gratitude of radio for a long time, for many years, was I'd go into the radio station to work in the morning and I would produce a promo that I thought sounded really cool. And the gratitude for me for that was getting in the car and hearing it come on the radio on the way home and cranking it up and going, yeah, that sounds fucking great. Obviously, with things changing and working for myself now and imaging stations that, you know, I can only really listen to on the internet when I've got 5 minutes and actually sort of get a chance to sit down and have a listen. I've had to find other sort of gratitude, in inverted commas, in the work that I do. It must be even more so for you. I mean, you're creating libraries that are going out all across the world and you don't get anywhere near that gratification. What do you take away at the end of each day?
I think it gets easier the longer you do it, right? So you're absolutely right. When I used to work at Big FM, which is like a CHR station here, I got this exact experience you were describing, like every day. Like, right, you drive home, you hear what you've done, you're like pumped up. Or you think, oh, I need to correct this and that. I can do this and this. And over the years, for sure is getting different. And I got a different point of view now because I know that so many people use what I do. It makes me kind of proud. And I'm really happy with every new signing and every new client because I know they're going to use what we're going to put together and take their own spin on it and make it even better. Yep. On the other hand, you don't get this gratification. So I still do some custom work where I can listen to the station terrestrial, which give me kind of that gratification. And maybe I just do this because of that, because it's not paid that well. But sometimes you see like a TVC you compose music for on TV and it still gives you like a good feeling, right? I mean, it's no doubt that this is kind of missing, but it's not that important for me anymore because I feel I work so much more for so many more different people than just working for one station. I think that's a big difference. If I worked for just one station and could not hear it, I think it would freak me out. If I know now that I work like for so many stations and try to help so many people and they're happy with what I'm delivering and I get some email back and people say, hey, that's great. How did you do this? Or what effect did you use here? And hey, please do more of this. And this is kind of my gratification now, to be really honest. Like positive feedback, but also the criticism and like, hey, can we have more of this? Or would you be able to do this and this? I think this is kind of the gratification, like seeing that people love what we do and I truly believe in that concept of creating fans, not customers. You know, that's kind of like the thing which gives me motivation.
It's funny. I think you hit the nail on the head. Then you're absolutely right. You must create fans, don't you? Because customers will come and go, but fans will stick around for thick and thin.
Yeah, and I think the feedback is really valuable. Like a lot of people, and I learned this the hard way, right? Because when you work in a radio station, your PD comes down, and it's like I said, it's Friday evening, and he wants to do a change. I mean, so obviously, you're not in the best mood, and you're gonna hate that person for now. Maybe if you go home, you understood, or you have the same opinion, but the way there, it's gonna be difficult, especially like for creative people, right? To get like negative feedback, but like doing this for so many years now, for so many different people in different formats, different cultures, different countries, I think you get it like you kind of crave for negative feedback because you understand that this is going to only make you better. So, and this is like what I learned like the hard way at the beginning, because obviously like when you work at a station and the PD likes you, like you get just great feedback, right? When you start doing a library and like it pops up in Australia, Philippines, United States, Germany, There's going to be people saying, hey, we don't play that song. Why is this song in music montage? And hey, I don't like the vocoder because we don't do this at our station here. And I think this is kind of like I said, part of the gratification too, and how you build fans, that you really try to serve and super serve like every individual, no matter like how big the station, what market it is in, what country it's even in, right? Like, and I think that's been like part of like why Benztown has been so successful over the course of the years, because when we started the company, like Dave's and my credo was always like put the customer first in the center of everything we do, right? Like we wanted to create fans because there was libraries out there when we started. It's not that we came with something totally new to the market and like everybody was waiting on the great new product, right? Like it was, I think that we took good care and really try to take the feedback and change things and change the site and make it a great user experience, but also like try to create the best product out there for every country, every market we work in.
That's really interesting, being like someone who's a voice as opposed to someone who produces the audio. The thing I find is that most of the time I hear anything I've ever done, I just pick holes in every single thing. And the problem is when you're the voice, you don't have the ultimate power when it comes to the session. You follow direction from somebody else. That's what I find more difficult, being on this side of the glass.
Yeah, but I think we all do that. I mean, I still do that. Shit, I've been doing this for coming up on 35 years, and I still listen to work and go that I've done and go, fuck, if I had my time over again, I wouldn't do that, or I would change that, or I would do that. And I think the day you stop caring about that is the day you should probably give it away.
True.
Yeah, and I think also like on the voiceover side of things, guys, it's also, in my opinion, depending like there's voiceovers, they're super versatile and super variable and they can deliver different things. But there's also this like typical brand voice who just does brand voices. And it's also cool, right? I mean, I feel it's, of course, you're important. Everyone wants to be important. The voiceover guy, the imaging guy. At the end of the day, I mean, we fulfill a purpose here, right? Like the imaging fulfills the purpose to make the station known, to brand the station, to make it accessible for the listeners / users these days, to give it a specific voice, to make it a brand, right? Like to basically create that cinema in the head for the PD, for the owners, for the listeners. Like we're like a tool to them too. And I think the same way goes for the voiceover talent. But there is nothing wrong to put some personality and some like own swag, ideas, and creativity in there, right? I think, but at the end of the day, and that's how I address it, right? I feel like I'm not that important, so I know everything. I feel like, okay, somebody like is a paying client and he has like a certain vision, even if I don't go 100% with that vision, I totally respect that 100% because it's at the end of the day, it's a client who knows his brand and his station and his thing the best. You know, it's not me looking onto that for like half an hour, knowing that better as somebody working in that market and working with that station for 20 years. I think I can give my opinion and I think I have the experience to give my opinion. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important that the customer goes out and feels like great about the product and the listeners feel good about it. And you should kind of a tool too. I mean, at a certain end, the imaging guy is a tool too, like the voiceover guy.
That's right. Absolutely. And I think you sort of nailed it in there. I think, you know, for me, it was either Dave Fox or Dan O'Day who said this, but they said, you know, basically our job as an imaging guy or an imaging voice is to give the listener a reason as to why they should care about what their radio station is and what it's doing.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of components to that as well, right? Because we just see like our small part, which is not a small part, but it's an integral part, but still a small part of a radio station, right? You can have the greatest image in the world if your morning show, and sorry, my language sucks. I mean, it's not good that you're going to be market leader just with great imaging. I mean, it's just, and there's a lot of components play into that, right? I mean, and I think the imaging is a big part, is integral, and you do have a great voice, you need to have good imaging, and you need to transport the messages like perfectly. And like you said, people should take care. But at the end of the day, it's like a lot of components in a radio station, like in every product.
But there's the irony in and of itself is that, you know, the imaging producer probably spends more time on air per hour than anybody else on the radio station.
100%. Yeah, that's my line. That's my strap line. You know, that's my strap line. If I explain like what I do, that's my strap line. I say, okay, calculate the time Jock will have by have it say, and then calculate my time / the voiceover's time. Yeah. And then you will understand like what is really significant as well to the radio station.
Indeed. Well, I should put my rates up based on that.
Absolutely. Jesus. You're getting paid about 10 times more per hour than what Andy and I are. So if anyone should be complaining, it's even me.
Yeah, big size.
That's how we know the voice people. Now, I mean, I think it's for everyone involved, it's the same thing, right? If I think great voiceover talents still get paid good money, and for up and comers is like more difficult, but also on one end financially more difficult, but easier than ever, then put yourself out there, right? Because with the internet and with like the willing to work hard and work on your voice and train, I think it's still a big possibility. Because I basically find new voiceover people like almost every other week, right? Because we get like submissions from so many people who want to be on our roster, and there's like impressive people there for their age. And really people you would have overlooked a few years ago because there was just no way that they could contact you besides like sending you a CD you would never listen to.
Yeah,
You know?
that's right. Yes, the drink coaster.
Yeah, coffee coaster.
That's exactly what it was.
Got a new coffee coaster, guys.
Yeah. But do you find a lot of the home studios vary dramatically?
Yeah, dramatically is like, I think is a nice word to say it. I mean, I just can tell. I mean, it's very difficult for me because I'm not a voiceover guy. I've never done voiceover, so I don't want to be judgmental. But I phrase it that way, like, and I can just tell that from me being like an imaging guy, right? Well, let's use sports analogy. If you're like if you want to be a world-class soccer player, you need to have more than a jersey, right? You need shoes as well. You need to maybe have a trainer, a nutrition specialist. I mean, look at Cristiano Ronaldo. Like, the guy does everything ever possible to give the best performance, right? And I think everyone in a professional job should do the best ever to give the best performance. And I think this counts for voiceover people as well. If I want to be on that Mercedes commercial or that BMW commercial, nationwide TV, I might consider getting my setup together. You know, get like a good microphone, nice preamp, or rent a studio for that. That's also a possibility. You don't have to invest millions to make that possible. I mean, a lot of things is provided for free on the internet. There's a lot of research. You can build that pretty inexpensive if you want to. Have friends can help you out. And of course, gear got like more cheaper than ever to get great gear. You know, best bang for the buck is like far more possible these days than like a few years ago. So yeah, I feel they vary dramatically, and I wish if I be a voiceover talent, I try to have like the best possible equipment and home recording situation.
Okay, talking of the best equipment, what do you feel is the best mic and preamp combination?
It's really tough to say because I think it varies with every voice. You know, I mean, it's hard to say. I'm a big fan. I personally am a big fan of the Manly Voxbox as a preamp, but this is not working with everyone, right? I mean, depends. I mean, I think there's a lot of like onboard solutions these days with UAD plugins and other stuff. You could almost do the same, not the same, and we know that, but you could almost do the same. So it's not that expensive to get a great sound if you know what you're doing or you're willing to spend some time with somebody who can show you what you should do. I mean, I spoke along with Harry, who I mentioned at the start about this, and I know that Harry's setup is like a Voxbox, Manly Voxbox, and a shotgun microphone. I think still is. That's the thing. I mean, the shotgun might not work perfectly with everyone. I mean, there's such a great variety of microphones out there. I mean, if you see like a U47, it's a fantastic microphone and it's worth $20,000, but you can't tell it's going to work perfectly with every voice.
True.
Because as we know, there's been artists like Michael Jackson who had recorded with a dynamic microphone, right? With a Sennheiser live microphone, right? Yep. Whatever fits your voice and your style, I think is perfect. But you should consider thinking about this if you want to be a professional voiceover talent.
Yeah. Well, I love the story of Bono and the SM58, which recently.
Yeah, that's the one I meant. Sorry. Exactly. That's the one Michael Jackson was using. That's the one. Exactly.
Yeah. It's bizarre, but there you go.
Yeah, but also it's Michael Jackson, right? So he can sing like whatever, like doesn't matter. Like,
yeah, that's right. He could sing the alphabet and it'd sound good. Yeah.
I mean, that voiceover thing is really, for me, sometimes is really challenging though. As a producer, and Robbo can tell, I mean, he can relate to that. I tell the people, man, just also send like unprocessed files.
Yes, please.
Because I think it's a great combination. There's people out there like Jeff Berlin, fantastic voiceover guy, fantastic producer. Like if he's going to send you processed files, you're going to be happy with it because he knows what he's doing. But also there's a lot of voiceover talents who just do something, right? Because it's me trying to be like a voiceover guy. It's not going to work out. It's not going to work. And that's the same for a producer. If you're a voiceover guy, you're not a producer. You're a voiceover guy. So I feel like the best way to go is to offer like unprocessed files if you're not 100% sure about your chain and how you record. I think the best way is also to send like unprocessed files and have the producer do whatever he thinks is best.
Yeah, well, I think George was saying when he sets up studios, he sets up 2 chains. So he sets up a chain that records. Am I right in saying this, AP? He records a chain. He sets up a chain that records just vocal straight off the mic, but then he also sets up a split off that then adds compression and EQ that he sets up for them. So basically, they're recording 2 files. One processed, one unprocessed. So the guys that George sets up studios for can offer both. That are all.
Well, George knows what he's doing for sure.
George is on top of it. He's on top of the game. So, while we're talking about toys, then, what's your weapon of choice? Do you go to Logic, Pro Tools?
Like I'm a Pro Tools guy through and through. Like I tried a lot of different things, but I still come back to Pro Tools. So I mean, for editing, I think it's still the best out there. For composing, it is maybe the best for me, but it's not the best out there. So there's a wonderful program called Studio One from Presonus. Most of the guys I work with do music, they use that. Basically has the best features. That's what they claim. So I'm not 100% sure if it's the truth, but I've seen it. I'm pretty impressed. It has like the best features from Logic and from Pro Tools, from Cubase. It's a fantastic program.
Is that true? Okay.
I mean, Ollie's using it heavily. 2 of my other guys are using it, but I think you can do great things in every DAW, depending if you are down to do great things. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people using Ableton and it works perfectly for them, right? I mean, look at all the electronic music. It's done in Ableton on a laptop. I mean, number 1 hits. Skrillex and these guys write their stuff on a laptop with Ableton Live. So, I mean, I think these days gives you a lot of option, and you should not be married to the one or the other. I think the creativity and to know what you're doing, no matter what type of DAW you're using, is key too.
So I'm probably opening a can of worms here, given Andy's Fiverr Friday, which for those who are unaccustomed to the Benztown blog, is Andy's little Friday afternoon imaging tips and tools. But what's your go-to plugin? What's the one you probably, if you opened up any of Andy's sessions, would probably be in most sessions? Besides a metering plugin, can I say?
I mean, there's a lot. The problem is like, I don't really have like one go-to. I mean, I use a lot of different things all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, I would name like one of each, right? Because I mean, you need different things, you know. Depending on the project, I'm a big fan like of the fat filter stuff. I think the Pro Q, like the EQ, is fantastic. On the compressor side, it's really difficult because it depends on what you're doing. I love all the UAD stuff. I think the emulations are really good. And I know a lot of the original gear, so I think the UAD stuff, a lot of the stuff is really, really, really good. I'm a big fan of like all the isotope stuff. Like I use Ozone frequently. The new vocal synth, if I do something with vocals, highly recommend. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff out there. But I also tend to use like a lot of old wave plugins, like still.
Yeah.
Right. So it's and you know that. I mean, it's depending on what you do, there's different weapons of choice. But yeah.
It's funny. I've just gone back. I installed Pro Tools 12 just recently, which is probably makes me behind the times, but I'm one of those people that believe if it's working, don't fuck with it. But finally bit the bullet and upgraded to Pro Tools 12 and was sort of setting up new templates and all that sort of stuff. And I mucked around with my mastering chain, and I threw in, just this morning actually, I threw in the old Bomb Factory BF76, and it's for something that's cheap and nasty. I got to tell you, if you hit it just right and get it just hitting that sweet spot that it obviously has, it actually sounds quite nice. And it's actually inspired me now to go back to some of those older sort of cheaper plugins and go, right, well, what can I suck out of you now?
Yeah, and I also think depending like what we're going to do, everything's going to be so compressed. So at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal, right?
Yeah.
Like if you do music and if you do like vocal recordings, big sessions like for jingles, or then it makes sense because the channel is going to add up and it's going to be a significant difference if you use like a NIF EQ or an SSL EQ on every channel. It makes a difference. I mean, you'll hear the difference. Yeah. And if it's outboard, more. I mean, everybody who has heard like a SSL like console, like an outboard, and like people are going to tell you, no, it's not a big difference if you use an emulation. Like everybody who has heard the difference in person will tell you there is a difference. The question is if the difference is worth 150 grand. You know, that's always the question. And like how music is consumed these days with MP3, like back quality, Spotify streaming, you know, Pandora, whatever. I mean, the question is always, does it make sense if you're not an audiophile to spend all that money on that sophisticated, super complex stuff, right? And for the imaging, especially in my opinion, as it's going to be like so over compressed at the end, and then you'll have like the on-air change, it's going to compress it again. I think the question we'll need to ask ourselves, like, are we effective? Do we do the right thing? You know, is that really making a difference or not? And sometimes it's fine to just play around and have fun like you did with the GBF76. I do this with a lot of old stuff too, you know. And I think also some of the onboard plugins coming with Pro Tools, like some of the Air stuff, is pretty fascinating to see what you can do.
Absolutely. You know? So listen, respectful of your time, but I've got to hit you up with one small thing, and I've got to start out with a question though. And the question is, your Benztown man in his little spacesuit, do you have a patent on that?
Yep, that's the trademark logo, I think.
Because I think we need to have a chat because the Pro Audio Suite podcast has come up with a something that we believe is truly new and innovative. It's called the voiceover suit. So rather than build a room, you pop down to your local tailor or to your local sort of, you know, fashionable clothing outlet, and you pick up this suit, which is basically like insulated and soundproofed, and you put your microphone inside the helmet, and you can record anywhere. You could be in the middle of the freeway and get a phone call. I need this voiceover right now. Not a problem. The voiceover suit's in the back. I'll just stop and I'll put it on and I'll read and I'll send it to you. So we were just wondering whether it's worth us having a conversation with you, because when we were discussing what it looked like, the first place I went was your logo. So I'm wondering whether we should have a chat about some royalties here or something.
Yeah, I think we'll figure out a way, I'm pretty sure.
I was thinking the look of the voiceover suit was more like a cross between Elvis Presley, the latter Elvis Presley with the cape and the high collar, and a spacesuit. Somewhere in the middle of that, I think would work really, really well.
I mean, that's like a real revolution. You know, that's a game changer. You know, it's far away from like.
See, are we thinkers or what?
That's a game changer. I'd love to see it, man. You have like a prototype or anything?
No, I think I've got to make some sketches though, because the more we talk about it, someone's bound to steal the idea before we get to it.
We'll probably turn up at NAMM next year and it will be there. Someone will turn up.
You know, if you go to the Benztown branding page and you click like on the individual formats, then you see that we basically we have the spaceman as a real costume, right?
Yeah.
So we have on venues, like there's people like walking or like it has to be like small girls most of the time because it's not that tall. But it's just, of course, it's LA, so like they know how to build like costumes and requisites and stuff there. But we got that as a real costume, and like the effect is fantastic. A pretty simple thing here again, coming back to your marketing thing from the start, right? I mean, it's nothing different than like a football team or like a baseball team having a guy in a costume running around. People still like that stuff, so I bet they love your voiceovers.
Absolutely.
We better stop talking about this voiceover suit.
I know. I think we should hush, right?
So the difference is you'll need like so many different sizes, because we just like have that one girl running around with that Gary suit all the time, or the Benztown spaceman suit, but you'll have so many different different sizes, you know, for that voiceovers.
That's it, exactly. Well, you know, I think that's the genius of this is, you know, we just make it one size fits all, you know, so somehow it stretches. So, you know, everyone can get their own voiceover.
It sounds like a really expensive product design here, you know?
Yeah. I'm just thinking, do you remember the Beatles microphones they use, the ones on like basically on a stick? So it was the bottle with the long stick and the ball on the end. Do you remember those microphones, Andy?
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of thinking if you wanted to have that kind of microphone, your voiceover suit would look more like Big Bird from Sesame Street.
Well, I think we've got to come up with a custom mic that fits inside somehow.
Yeah.
So what microphone do you mean now from the Beatles? Like, I'm getting interested. So because I know that they used like a in Abbey Road they used like a U47, like they had like U47 microphones in Abbey Road. But do you mean the live microphones?
Yeah, they used. You'll see it on the. All You Need Is Love, the live satellite. It's an AK. I think it's an AKG. I think it's the AKG.
And I think it's the KM84. But they also use the AKG 202. I'm looking it up right now because I'm getting really interested. I love microphones. Getting like really.
Jesus, don't leave you and AP alone in a room together. Then we'll never see you again.
Well, I know a guy.
What are you using for?
Oh, don't start him. Don't start him. Seriously, we'll be here all night.
Come on, you will love this. It's in your territory. I'm using a Microtech Gefell 92.1S.
That's a nice one. Have you ever, with your voice, because I mean you got like really good pipes, have you ever tried like one of the, I mean, of course people don't like that because they need to like do whatever with their voice, but have you ever tried like the U47 or one of these older iconic like tube microphones, like the original ones? Like, I know it's a massive investment, but I mean, I see your voice like, I mean, that's like.
The only problem is when you go into vintage mics is it's just the upkeep. You just don't,
I know.
That's the problem with buying something like that. I mean, I've used a classic 87s, like 40 late 60s, early 70s 87s. I've used U47s, but not necessarily that old. But I kind of like this. The thing about this microphone, it's got it has the M7 capsule. So it's a UM57. It's an updated version of a UM57, and I just think it's for what it is. It's a fantastic microphone. I mean, admittedly, they're not that cheap, but they're certainly cheaper than a U47.
Yeah, sounds about right, though. I mean, I bet you got your setup together.
Yeah, it's good. And it was funny, actually, because yesterday I was doing a session. You were talking about working in the box and using UA stuff. I was working in a studio, and the guy actually turned up with his laptop. And on his laptop, he had his Apollo, and he had 1073 on his laptop, the Universal Audio version. So, and I'm sitting here with the real one, of course, the outboard 1073, but it sounded pretty good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, the more and more I dig into the outports stuff, the more I kind of like it. It's just, at the end of the day, it's a question of, like, for what we do, I mean, if you do straight music, makes sense, but also you're never going to get it back, right? And this is really, I don't want to like extend, I mean, now we're getting like really the techie stuff, but if you think about that, you can get like a track mastered, like in a really great mastering studio for like 150, 200 bucks, never going to make the investment of 150, 200 grand back you put in like in terms of gear. So that's just, I think these days problem with all that stuff, because whenever I look into like big mixing desk or like another outboard thing, I'm like, okay, this is like whatever, 20 grand. Do I really need this? This is like 5 grand. Do I really need this? No, it'd be just nice to play around with it, but do I really need it? No.
I mean, look, I'm a sucker for buying stuff, and I'm freely admit that, except to my wife, of course. So I've got, for what I do, stupid amounts of stuff here. So
to put you in the picture, Andy, there's usually 1 or 2 days a week where an audio file lands in my email inbox, and it's AP going, "Hey, I've just tried this mic with this pre. Have a listen, see what you think."
Yeah. I mean, it's like the opportunities are endless. I totally get that. I mean,
look, I love it. And the trouble is that I shouldn't do it, but I can't help it. I get something set up and it's working. Everyone goes, yeah, that's great. That sounds great. And then, of course, I go, I wonder what it would sound like if I did this. And then all of a sudden, it's like a rabbit hole. And I'm down the rabbit hole, patching things in and going, oh, yeah, but I reckon this sounds even better,
Yeah. But again, it's like we said before, mate, it shows you care, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good takeaway from the entire thing. Like, as long as you care, as long as people care.
So, to wrap things up, mate, where does people find you or Benztown if they want to know more about what you guys have to offer? Where do they go? What do they do?
I mean, the easiest way I think to find Benztown is if you just go to benztown.com or benztownbranding.com, which then would be the library site. You could also, if you want to get in touch, you can find me on Facebook under my real name. You find me on Instagram under my real name. and on Twitter, but I don't like, to be really honest, I don't use Twitter that much. It's just overwhelming for me, like all this information. It's hard for me to process. So I think the easiest way, or you contact me over the Benztown blog. There's like a contact formula. So if you drop a note, it's going to end up somewhere or I read it. That's
well, I can highly recommend the, what is it? It's Andy's 5 of Friday. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Benztown blog in general has a lot of resources about like radio imaging, but a lot of also about production, audio production, imaging production, plugin reviews. There's a lot of stuff on there.
It's a go-to for me. It's this, as soon as it hits my inbox every week, I still love to open it up because you're finding some great stuff out there.
That's awesome, man, because sometimes I'm getting like, oh, is anybody reading this? Should I stop this? Because, of course, it's a commitment and it's time, but I still like doing it. And this week I'm going to do like some plugin layering thing. I think I'm going to release it this afternoon. So if you want to check it out, it's kind of like the 3 plugins I use for layering the most right now. So it's kind of like, it's a very personal thing, right? I mean, it's not that I'm going to go there and tell people how to do things. It's just me and playing around with stuff and giving my opinion.
Well, I think it's what we were just talking about with plugins too, though. It's sort of like, it's taking that and going, yeah, that sounds great, but how do I make it work for me? And let's start there, but see what works for me from that start point. It's just getting new ideas out there, and I think that's great.
Totally.
Well, dude, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you guys for having me. Like, I'm honored to be like in a row with all these great people you have had on like the last 56 episodes, right? It's pretty impressive.
Yes.
Well, I, as an old imaging dude, a couple of my clients use Benztown, and hopefully there'll be one more in the not too distant future that we've been talking about. So I can, as a user, I can highly recommend your product.
Appreciate that. I mean, whoever likes want to reach out and wants like a tour or like, we're always there, and always happy like to show people around and feel out if there's a way that we can create some magic together.
Well, the next time I get to Stuttgart, I'm going to knock on your door, ring on your bell, and maybe tap on your window too.
And have Robbo send me your voiceover demo. I think we could definitely utilize this here and there. So
I love
nothing like a job offer while you're on an interview, AP.
And it's gone live, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it first.
Thing, though, right? I mean, I bet he gets it like every week. Oh, who's that guy with that voice? Yeah, just send me. And Robbo and I go like, okay, there's nobody wanting our demo. It's always the voiceover.
No, that's right. So it's like, especially me, it's Jesus is that 40-year-old fucking imaging guy again. He's hassling us for work.
40-year-old.
Yeah, I'm still 40. I'm still in my 40s. Thank you very much. Got another year to go yet.
On that bombshell, we should bail out and get back to the other boys.
100%.
So there you go. That's Andreas from Benztown, and what a business he's built.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
I tell you what, he's doing well, isn't he? He's just for those of you who didn't pick it up in the episode, Benztown pretty much do. I think they've got 9 sound effects libraries for radio promos. They have just picked up all of Rick D's program production. So anything that Rick D's Entertainment puts out is now produced by Benztown. They also do a custom radio imaging for radio stations. And
they also have me on their books. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Well, you'll also find Andrew Peters on their voiceover. That's the other thing I was trying to think of. They also have radio imaging voices. So
so they've really got a sort of a machine there going, I guess, it sounds like.
Yeah, they're huge. I actually did work for them for a little while. A while back, about 5 or 6 years ago, they were using people all around the world to do the production for their custom imaging. And they were outsourcing that. So for a while, I was doing a station in Buffalo, New York, and a couple of others for Benztown. But then they, as they got bigger, obviously, and financially, it made more sense. They took it all back in house. But a behemoth of a machine.
You should be living in Stuttgart.
I should be.
So they're arranging for the voice. They're even possibly doing the copy. They're doing all the mixing and the delivery.
They can do,
and then you lined it up where you want.
Yeah, they can pretty much do as much or as little as you want in terms of imaging your radio station. So I think it's a really clever model.
And it's also, as he mentioned, it's all done on the barter system, which...
Yeah. Now, listen, before we got rolling on this episode, Robert, you and I were having a bit of a chat about presets on plugins, and I was saying that there's only one preset that I can think of that comes with a plugin that I use, and that would be on the Waves H compressor. They've got a really nice parallel compression setting that I like to use on, funnily enough, my parallel voice bus.
I use it's funny because most of the plugins that I use have this preset. It's a good one. It's called Factory Default.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Sorry, it took a second. It's like my brain's not working. It took a second for that to register, but I'm with you now.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Factory preset.
But I think what you and I were chatting about was more, because they have their built-in library of stingers and swooshes and all that stuff. But a lot of the effects need to be brought in with various delay and pitch things. And I was saying, like, how much of that is preset work and how much of that is,
I guess, look, for me, the reason I've been so busy this week is one of the stations in Singapore that I image, hello to everyone at 1FM, have changed station voices as well as their branding and all the rest of it. So everything had to change. So I guess to answer your question the long way around, obviously for what let's call straight voice, which is just voiceover in the promo, I find my EQ, my compression, and any sort of little reverbs and stuff delays that I put on that to juzz it up for radio, and save all that. But then I also go and find, because I believe in consistency of sound, that telephone EQ sound that's classic on radio, which is probably never as easy as it sounds, because it's not only is it an EQ curve, it's a whole bunch of other shit, phasing and modulation and all that stuff thrown in there. I find that sound that I'm going to use for the life of that voice on the station, and that's where I use my presets. I'll sort of all that stuff, all those reverbs and EQs and modulations, and almost the EQ curve, although that usually needs to get adjusted each time. But all that stuff I'll save as a preset. So when I come to each session and I'm sticking it on the bus, I'll just turn them on and off then with using the presets.
And this kind of brings up another thing, which is like, part of the preset is the exact setting, but another thing about the preset is more like the setup. And we're seeing this in a lot of, the plugins that come out where it's everything. I mean, I'll use the Waves line as an example, but they even have the one knob series, which is like, well, there's just a whole preset with one control. Or you have their other, signature series where they have, some producer and they have their vocal channel, for example.
Chris Lord-Alge has a vocal, he has a whole bunch, and mix and vocal and guitar and bass and all that. Yeah.
And I think Sheps as well, probably. But those are all like entire setups with routing and aux sends, and I do this type of delay, and then I also have that type of delay, and then behind that I have like a octave down thing or who knows what it is. And it's a preset, not so much in, it's a pre-setup. Not so much a preset, but a structure.
Like an entire Pro Tools session with all the routing and all the fixins.
It is.
Yeah. Is that what you mean?
It's something that you would normally set up with a bunch of aux sends and returns, and now it's all jammed into one plugin.
Yep.
I've been doing that for podcasts.
How much of that is?
Yeah. Well, see, I go that way with everything I do, especially my imaging. Like now for 1FM, every time I start a new project, in Pro Tools, I've created a template. So I open that up, all my routing, all the plugins that I use are sitting there but bypassed, even down to my master compression and all that sort of stuff. It's all sitting there, bypassed, ready to go, so that, it's just makes life easy. It's just stick in the voice, do a bit of gain staging, and then from there start building the promo. So rather than having to think about...
It sounds like you're working more from discrete plugins, and I need a delay.
Yeah.
Boom, I put a delay on there.
Yeah.
I want to have that delay go, yo. Well, I put a pitch processor on that, and you kind of create your structures yourself within your workstation.
That's right.
Compared to relying on these various types of plugins, which are sort of set in their structure, but you don't have to go through either that creative process or that work, whichever you want to consider.
I still
get
use
to that
those.
point.
I still use those. I still use, we were just talking before the show, I bought myself, just out of interest, I bought one knob brighter and one knob fatter, I think. And I just threw them on my voice chain during the week just to have a listen and see how it went. And, it's surprising. I mean, I probably wouldn't use it as my only sort of processing, but I guess for someone who's sort of starting out and, or maybe in podcasting or whatever and sort of trying to get their head around the whole process, I certainly think they have their place.
Yeah. I actually think that some of them have their place in the sense that, I'd even be surprised I wouldn't be surprised if, for instance, there was a producer who has his own signature series and he's using some other producer's signature series plugins.
Yeah.
Even though they all could very well make it themselves, but they're like, what's this? Oh, I'll
play with that. Yeah, look, but that's audio though, isn't it? I mean, I can't think the last time that I went into a session, or something new and didn't play with something. If you're not constantly reinventing the way you work and trying new things, then you sort of fall behind, I think.
Absolutely. But at the same time, you also are getting put into these ruts because, well, now you've got so-and-so's structure. Of course, there's infinite ways to combine all these things. But I was just curious, especially because in the imaging, to bring it back to the radio imaging thing, I think a lot of those things would be great just from the sense of you just went through this marathon week, and how much does some of that speed up your work?
Oh,
There's
totally.
That
Have that whole template, Pro Tools template thing, takes away a whole bunch of thinking, because then I can move my thinking from what's my telephone voice in inverted commas going to sound like, what's my delay going to sound like, all that sort of stuff. I don't have to think about that anymore. I can then think about the creative process of how am I going to make this music edit? What am I going to do here? What am I going to do there? And I don't have to think about that final mixing.
Is that template worth? How much is the Robbo imaging Pro Tools template worth? Would you sell it for $500?
As a plugin.
Would you sell it for $1,000?
It's on sale this week for $29.
If you wanted to put a price on it for my clients, I mean, it probably saves me an hour for every project that I work on, because by the time you averaged it out about across the amount of projects that I'll now work on using this Voice for 1FM, it would probably be or maybe half an hour per session or something like that.
So does it save you even more time if, for example, in your Pro Tools template, you've got separate aux sends and delays and reverbs, and those are all different faders. And now you have the option possibly to put in the Robbo Radio Magic 2000 plugin. And now it's all in, like, all your automation's on one channel.
Yeah.
It's all on one bypass. Like, all of a sudden that setup and even the work of that setup becomes more consolidated.
Yeah.
Beyond just, if you want that setup, you just drag the plugin over.
You could certainly do that with my voice stuff, because there's, like if I think about what I did during the week with Elias, who's the male voice of this thing, there's, if you look at the bussing for his main voiceover part, there's a main voiceover, which has got EQ, compression, all the usual stuff on there. Then there's a parallel bus that has just a shitload of compression, and actually, funnily enough, talking about the one knob stuff, I found this really great effect that on that parallel bus, I used one knob wetter and put a little bit of that reverb on it, but then then stuck another compressor after that. And it gives this funny little effect that just, you probably wouldn't even know it was there unless you listened really closely.
So it's like crushed reverb?
Yeah. It sounds, it's bizarre. Anyway, that's that bus. And then there's 3 buses that have other effects that, one of them has like 4 plugins on just the one bus, which goes, I think it goes to an EQ, to some modulation, then compress, and then a tiny bit more EQ after that. But there's 3 buses of effects that just, and again, you don't hear them working until you take them out. It's not like in your face sort of stuff, but it just gives that radio sound, I guess, that everyone sort of goes looking for.
It's the thing is, like, that saves your client some time because you have the template. But imagine what it would do for a new producer to have your template to start out their day. Can you imagine what that is worth to that producer? That's when selling things like a template become interesting.
This new genre of plugins, because it's like every plugin, a couple of years back, it was like, we've got emulated compressors and emulated EQs. And that's a little bit played out, and there's still more emulated plugins coming out. But essentially, what's left, I mean, someone's going to literally come out with an emulated Radio Shack EQ, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the new genre is starting to, I think, be these structured plugins, so to speak. Here's your mastering setup.
That's
Here's
right.
your vocal setup.
Isotope Nectar, for example, has like 8 or 9 different plugin processors that you can resequence in any order you want, but individually bypass them. And it's loaded with presets. It's pretty dang mind-boggling what Nectar does. I've been playing around with it more and more for clients because, if they don't have a lot of plugins, they buy one plugin and now they have every tool a voice actor ever would need in one plugin, and I can create a preset for them, send it to them, and boom, they've got the sound they need.
I think that's interesting, and I wonder, I guess, or watch out, Darren. You Robbo, you should make the Robbo. What did I call it? The Radio Magic 2000.
Yeah, I like the Radio Shack 2000. I can go with that.
The Robbo Radio.
Robbo's Radio Shack 2000. Hey,
how about the Voodoo You Do?
The Voodoo You Do. There you go. Very nice.
Or you do.
Hey, George, just you were talking about Isotope. I downloaded during the week. Eventide have come out with their own sort of version of what you were talking about. They've got, I'm just looking at it now in my audio suite. It's called Newfangled Elevate and Newfangled Punctuate, which is designed to go across your mix bus. I actually haven't had a chance to throw it across anything yet, but next week when things slow down, that's on my list of things to do, is to open it up and have a bit of a play with it. But yeah, Eventide are throwing their hat in that ring as well.
Hey, Robbo, let me ask you a quick question. When you deliver the radio, are you delivering it crushed like a music CD, just like like no headroom?
Yeah. No. I squash the living shit out of voice and all that sort of stuff, obviously, because you really want to get that fat sort of sitting on top of everything sort of sound. But my final mix, I really don't go that hard. I go, what's my path at the moment? I've been going through the H compressor.
Well, you don't use a VU. Like I'm sure at the very end you got some sort of averaging type.
I just use a VU. I'm just running the Doro meters and I spit it.
Okay.
The final plug-in in my chain is a limiter at -3, and that's how it goes
do
out.
you feel like your average, like what's the
the average would be up there. The average would
peak?
probably be -15, maybe.
Okay,
up there, so reasonably loud.
Yeah,
it's not too extreme.
Yeah,
and then you have to think about the
like
fact that you're producing something that's going to go out through more processing, right?
That's
so this is going
exactly
on the radio.
The reason I don't do it.
This is going out through an Orban 31-band multi-band processor, and
the Optimod.
the Optimod, and it's being squeezed. Every single frequency band is being squeezed with an inch of its life. And so it's going to be even more heavily processed and limited. So if you do that on the front end, there's not going to be anything left. It's going to sound pretty
That's right.
So
it's just going to be a big mess.
You don't overdo it.
I would argue that that's not necessarily true, because all the music CDs are coming out squeezed and compressed and killed. And usually the idea was that if you do it before that Orban does it, then the Orban has nothing left to do because it's already
true.
It's already at its peak, and so you're doing your own damage.
Yeah.
At least you can kind of control your own damage.
Yeah.
Interesting point.
For me, I guess the proof's in the pudding. I mean, for me, the nice thing is that because I'm constantly working for these stations, is that I can, especially these days, with internet radio, I can flick on, a radio app and listen to the station and sort of hear what's going on and adjust. And that's one of the things I've got to do this weekend, is find a couple of hours just to sit and listen. And, I'll probably work on my website or something while I've got 1FM playing in the background and just listen, not only from a creative point of view, but from also from an audio point of view. What do I need to tweak? What do I need to do? But that's one of the nice things about what I do, is sort of, for radio anyway, is whereas with a commercial, you make it once and it goes out and it's like, well, live with it. That's all I can do. But at least with imaging, you sort of have the chance to sort of develop what you're doing a bit as you go.
There's a really interesting change in radio, which it's a little bit disappointing. Used to be the chain was always a beautiful chain. So by the time it got to going into transmission, you had a lovely sound. But now it seems to be everything is done right at the last minute with all sorts of processing, because the studios are not built properly. They're using, pretty average equipment,
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing. I mean, George, you'll laugh at this, but you walk into Triple M in Sydney, which is the radio station that I used to work at, but they're now in new facilities in the city. You walk into the main production studio, and it's 4 glass walls. That's the studio. It's basically all glass on all 4 sides. And
fish tank.
That's right. And that's the reason. So it looks good when we bring clients on a station tour. Who gives a fuck about what the poor dude that's got to work in there and do the radio imaging? But when we bring clients through, oh man, it looks sexy, and wow, you guys are, wow, look at all that equipment and whoa. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's the way radio's going. Is it's all about, well, you know, we're going to spend all this money building a production studio. What else can we get out of it?
The image.
Well, I know one of the guys that I
imaging.
work for.
Yes, the image of imaging. Absolutely.
One of the guys that I do imaging for, one of the stations, the guy has to work with headphones because the room is so bad.
Yeah, right. I don't doubt that at all.
It's terrible.
Yeah. And hello to Michael Sideshow Anderson at Triple M in Sydney, who deals with that studio on a daily basis. I'm sure he's mixing in headphones too.
Well, that brings us to the end of our radio imaging special. And thanks to our special guest, Andreas from Benztown. Thank you, chaps. Next episode, we're going to be talking about Source Connect with some questions that have been sent through to us to answer with the help of course, Robert Marshall.
Very nice. Good fun. I like talking about radio. Thank you, fellas, for indulging me.
Oh, yeah.
You've been indulged.
Goodbye, goodbye. Wipe the tear, baby dear, from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know I'll be tickled to death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh. There's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, old thing, cheerio, chin chin, na poo toodaloo, goodbye.